Welcome everyone to the main journey, a way for you to join me on a learning journey through life. My name is Samuel Main, and today we welcome Brandon Eastman to the show. Welcome, Brandon. Thank you for joining me.
Samuel, it's a pleasure to be here, brother.
Love it.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
First of all, I would like to simply say touche on your podcast setup. For those listening to the audio, Brandon has a very professional setup, and full transparency, I'm envious.
Well, I'll tell you, your setup looks pretty cool too, because for like the first year of the podcast, for like the first 9 months of the podcast, I had a curtain that I used. So it was just me and then a curtain behind me, which it was a clean look, but it just kind of looked like you thought something else was going on back there. You know what I mean?
Shady.
So and you can't do anything alone, man. Just like you shouting out Troy. My wife, like obviously probably a very different relationship there, but my wife has always known that I've wanted a cool setup for my show. And she surprised me one day. I came home and she's like, "Hey, you should go check out downstairs." And I was like, "Why? What's going to be down there?" And she's like, "Just go check it out." So I'm going down the stairs to the dungeon, I call it, which it kind of still looks like a dungeon. And the door is closed. And I'm like, "What's going on here?" So I truly had no idea. I opened the door and she set up the sign and the candles, and I gave her no inspiration idea. She just knows me. And dude, it blew me away. So it just goes to show, like, surround yourself with the right people, man.
That's a keeper.
I'm blessed for sure.
I'm missing that part. So maybe I need to find someone who can help me actually rearrange.
All things in time, man. All things in time.
That's it. Well, Brandon, let's get into this. You have been in sales since you were 18 years old, which kind of blows my mind, which means you've seen a lot of the industry. You've seen the ups, you've seen the downs. You are prolific in your content output. I was very, very impressed when I was stalking you in your profile today. You have this company, Be Better Industries, which I'm excited to learn more about. I absolutely love the message that you portray. You've spent years becoming a high performer salesman yourself, and then also transitioning into leading sales teams, which I'm sure we're going to delve into later today as well. Yeah. I'd love to go back to the early days when you were first starting out. And if you can share with me and the audience just a little bit of a funny story of either a client call that didn't go so well or something that happened, I'd love to know.
There's so many to tell, man. And it's funny because I was in sales since I was 18, although I think we've all been in sales since we were born. Life is a game of sales and persuasion and holding attention and influence. And I actually wanted to be a lawyer in high school, and I graduated and I started to go to online school to be a lawyer because, to me, lawyers made great money. They got to wear the suit. They looked and sounded cool in the courtroom. And I realized immediately that that was the path that I didn't want to go down. But while I was doing that, I was working at Walmart, actually. And you have Walmarts in England, right? Do you have Walmarts there?
No, we don't. But I've spent some time in the States, so I know that Walmart is a huge,
it's giant. It's absolutely giant. I didn't know they weren't in England, but I guess that makes sense. You probably have your own variant. Yeah. But I started working there and I sold cell phones at Walmart. And it was like retail sales, just like the sales job that I was in afterwards. But I was seasonal and they laid me off. Okay. And I was upset because I was making like $10 an hour. It was the best money I've ever made in my life. And I found a job listing on Craigslist for cellular sales, which is the company I worked with for a decade. Okay. And I was like, okay, cool. So I applied, and I remember the woman who interviewed me, and this is kind of the funny story. The woman who interviewed me said, "Brandon," she said, she had like this Long Island accent, right? Thick Long Island accent. She's like, "Brandon, how much money do you want to make here?" And I was like, well, I'm making like $10 an hour right now. So anything around there would be pretty cool for me. And she says, "Listen, honey," she's like, "that's not going to cut it here." She's like, "The average salesperson makes $3,800 a month." And I was like, $3,800 a month. I was like, how the hell are they making this kind of money selling phones? And I was like, that sounds great. Sign me up. And lo and behold, the first month I worked there, I made the self-fulfilling prophecy of $3,800. But every month after that, I was over $5,000 a month. And eventually with the company, I reached the 6-figure point. But I mean, dude, there's so many funny stories when it comes to clients. But it was just like a belief buster for me.
Yes.
Someone saying that you could be earning what you make in Walmart in a year in 1 month, because I was, part-time there. So I was with them for a decade, and many trials and tribulations later, here I am with my own business. And that's how we were connected through Caleb, and many different stories in between. But I mean, the thing with sales, man, is every month it resets. And I believe that this mindset can benefit everybody. If you look at every month like it resets, you don't treat the last month as, that's how it's going to be always. Even now with what we do, every month you've got to find more guests. Right? Every month you've got to look at your statistics. You have to gauge, where am I at? Where do I want to be? And, you can be a hobbyist about it, but you can also be a business about it. And once you start looking at everything, not everything, but most things that we do with our time, like a business, it causes you to treat things in a very different way and be a bit more intentional about them. And sales really taught me that from a young age. Every month you got to do it over again and do it over again. But eventually you build, and it becomes easier and easier because you get better and better.
It's so interesting. There's like two things straight away that I want to delve into. The first thing you mentioned about that 3,800, and you ultimately hit that in that first month. So I'm really intrigued. Of like, I wonder if she'd said, "Oh, most people are going to make 10K," and if that would have been your bar. So I wonder if that 3,800 would almost like a limiter for you, even in those early stages, which is really quite interesting. And then something that I think we look at this maybe quite differently. So my upbringing was coaching and going through a coaching degree, and then I've been coaching my whole life, and I'm very fulfillment based. And I look at actually everything that I do not as a business. I look at everything that I do as something that I'm trying to do for fun. I'm trying to find a way just to enjoy that journey, enjoy that process. Whereas obviously you look at it from a place of business. So it's super interesting. I don't think either is right or wrong.
Sometimes it's to a fault.
And same for me, because I just like most, I quite often will undercharge for time because I just want to go and help people. I'm always willing to like extend contracts and just like, hey, I'll do whatever I need to do to help you. Super interesting. So when you've gone through that process for you in sales, and clearly very business motivated, was money the leading driver for you in those early stages?
It was number one, only because for me, I grew up with a family who I had a business owner for a father, and my mom was a waitress who actually made really good money as a waitress. And money was like the only thing I'd ever known. And it's not like they taught me, hey, Brandon, go out and make a ton of money. But I wasn't very popular in school. I didn't play sports. I grew up as a gamer. So I played games like RuneScape. I played World of Warcraft. And did you play those too?
Not World of Warcraft, RuneScape.
Yes. Awesome. I love that, dude. Okay. So I was a heavy RuneScaper, man. And like quite literally a heavy RuneScaper. Like I was overweight my entire like adolescence and teenage years because I was in front of a computer playing games. But I like to say that they taught me a lot. And in those games, like the number one motivator is get more gold, earn more money, buy cooler gear, buy nicer things. And I never actually put those two things together until you just brought that up. But I went into my real world always thinking that money was the number one thing for me. And at 18, I mean, I was making more money than my parents when I was 18 years old. Incredible. 19, even more, 20, even more, 21, even more. But then I started to realize that I was making a lot of money. I had all the things that I wanted. I had the guitars because I love guitar. I had the brand new gaming computer that I definitely couldn't afford at the time. I had the car that I probably shouldn't have bought. Like I had all these things that I thought would make me happy, but I realized that my health was in the gutter. Like I was 260 pounds. To give you an idea, now I'm 205 pounds now. And, I was just unhappy with how I felt about myself. And I looked in the mirror and I had no purpose. And this is where I was saying, to a fault, that business mindset's not always the right thing, because I didn't even have an idea of what fulfillment meant back then. And I think it's changed for me, but I didn't understand personal development. I didn't understand self-care. And I think there's a lot of people out there right now who are in their late 20s and 30s and even their 40s and 50s who still don't understand the importance of self-care, personal development, how to support yourself so you can support others. And it got to a point, man, where I wanted to move up into leadership with the company. Okay. Because I was just in sales at this point. Right. And I wanted to train people. And I remember going to my boss at the time and saying, hey, I want to move up here. And he literally laughed at me. And I was like, what's so funny? And he's like, Brandon, how can you expect to lead people if you can't even lead yourself? How do you expect them to respect you if you don't even respect you? And I was like, what? And he's like, look at your body. He's like, I know you're unhappy about yourself. I know you're just buying all these things to fill a void. He's like, once you start focusing on yourself, then we can talk about leadership.
Wow, that's a very powerful conversation right there. Very powerful conversation.
It hurt, man. It hurt. I wasn't ready for it.
I don't think anyone's ever ready for that question, those conversations, but it's what everyone needs. It's really interesting from my perspective, because I can already tell that me and you already connect very well. However, our upbringings and everything and our perspectives are almost polar opposite, which is really interesting for me. Because when I look back at my youth, I was, pretty fortunate. I was relatively popular. I was the sporty guy. I was in good shape.
Yeah, I can tell you got nice hair.
I'll take it. And then you mentioned about the gaming. I always looked at it as like, I was obsessed with gaming. I was creating YouTube videos for gaming.
Me too. Yeah.
Early days.
Yeah.
And then my perspective changed of like, okay, cool. I keep leveling up in games, but I'm not leveling up in life. So I changed my perspective to be like, okay, actually, I need to start leveling up in real life. So that is, getting more money in real life, getting in better shape in real life, and becoming a better me, a better version of myself in real life. And there's actually a really good book that writes about this. I think it's Steve Cam or Steve Lamb. And it's a little bit of an older school book now, but it talks about the gamification of your life. So if you're a gamer and you're into personal development, this is a great book to lead into. But you also mentioned about your own fitness journey. For anyone who is not used to the pounds conversion, 260 pounds is about 120 kilograms. So that's where he started and was able to make some serious progress towards under 90 kg, which is very impressive. You mentioned about this very powerful conversation that you had with this guy. Was that the initial trigger then for you to be like, wow, I need to change not only my business life, but also then personal health and identity?
Yeah, I think there were two triggers. I think that was one of them. I think the main one was I was buying all these big, nice things, right? Because again, I thought money was everything. And I never told my wife how I was paying for these things, but I had a credit card that had a very high limit on it. And everyone's probably going to be saying, well, weren't you making like six figures? Yes. But I had a nice apartment. I had a nice car. I had a lot of expenses I had to pay for. So everything else that I was buying was just on top of it. It was money I didn't have. So I was racking up credit card debt. And I remember my wife came into the apartment one day and she had the letter from TD Bank in her hands showing the statement balance. And she's like, babe, do you know how much money you have on this card? I was like, I think like $4,000 maybe. And she's like, no, you've racked up over $10,000 just on this one credit card. She's like, how many other credit cards do you have? And I was like, I got the Citi card, I've got the Barclay card, and I've got a Discover card. And she's like, how much are on those? And in total, my debt was over $20,000. And I was kind of just pushing it off. I have this superpower of ignoring things that are wrong. And she's the complete opposite of me. And she's like, we got to figure this out. And I was like, yeah, we got to figure it out. It was one of the most down points of my life. And I think it was literally right the next week or very close to is when I had that conversation with my boss, my leader at the time. And that's when I was like, okay, I got to do something here. But I was annoyed when he said that to me. When he told me that I needed to start working on myself and that I wouldn't become a leader, I was like, what's he talking about? I'm number one. I know how to do my job. I'd be the best trainer someone could ask for. He obviously doesn't know what he's missing. He's wrong. And I actually started looking for a different job. And I looked at the competitor. I worked for Verizon and the competitor was AT&T, right? So I actually got the job there. I'm about to fly out for training. And he calls me, my mentor, and he's like, well, he wasn't my mentor at the time, but he became my mentor. Yep. And he said, Brandon, he's like, I know you're about to leave. He said, I know you're making a giant mistake because you told me that you're going to be getting married in 2 years. You're making six figures here. I know people at AT&T who are just as good as you, who are not making nearly as much. He's like, Brandon, you can turn this thing around. If you start focusing on you, you can fix this and you can repair the bridges that you burned, and you can become whatever you want here. You just have to stop thinking that the grass is going to be greener on the other side. And I was like, what do you recommend? And he said, I want you to read this book. And he gave me a book called The Secret by Rhonda Byrne. Have you read The Secret?
I have. It's been a few years, but I know it's heavy into law of attraction and very powerful.
And like I said, though, that was brand new to me at that time. The idea that your thoughts can become things, the idea that what you think you will attract to you. I didn't hear anything about that my entire life. Like, my parents never really read books. I think my dad read like one Donald Trump book when he was younger, The Art of the Deal. And he always talked about that. But I never read, I never was introduced to that world. And he gave me that book, Keith, my mentor, and I read it. And it was cheesy because it was something completely polar opposite to what I was used to. But I realized I've got no choice, man. I have to apply what this book talks about, or my life is just going to keep getting worse.
Man, it's so interesting to like reflect on that, and then also how it like is appropriate to then, you know, my journey and kind of what happened for me. I love that you mentioned about one, the mentor, but also then essentially a book, because it's such underutilized tools that people don't use. The book for me that kind of was my initial trigger of change and entry into like the self-development world and travel and running online businesses. It was a very common book, but the 4-Hour Work Week.
Oh yeah.
There's so many people that have had that as their trigger too. And it's very interesting for me that you were able to change your financial position, not by reading a technical book about finances and going through that process, but actually going more towards The Secret, something relatively spiritual in a way. And that's not a common approach. So that's really interesting for me, because every time I've looked at finances and making improvements there, it's always heavy in investing. It's, you know, it's budgeting here. And so it's like polar opposite again for me. It's super.
Don't get me wrong. In all fairness, I read The Secret. Yeah. And I started working on my body first. Yeah. And then after that, which we can get into, after that, then I did read a Dave Ramsey book, Total Money Makeover by Dave Ramsey. Yeah, classic. And his snowball method is actually the method that I used to get out of the debt that I was in. And it absolutely worked. And it was so unconventional. I was like, wow, this is definitely not what I'm doing. Yeah. So I believe that opening my mind to what the law of attraction speaks about and what Rhonda Byrne talks about in her book, that led me to finding more books that I can like. I read a ton of books at that time. After I read The Secret, I read Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. I read a couple Jim Rohn books. I dived into Tony Robbins, like dove in head first. He was my dude, still is my dude. Like, I would love to meet him. I'd love to have him on my show at some point. That'd be like a freaking honor. And then I dove into Dave Ramsey, and I started reading, and I actually started to work on myself. And that's when I really started to see the big changes, is when I started to intentionally work to level up myself, just like we were so used to leveling up in a video game. It's the same thing. It's the same concept. You do something over and over and over. You attack the cow 400 times to raise your attack level, right? But in life, you read and you learn, but you don't just learn, because I know a lot of people who read and learn, but you take what you learn and you implement it, and you screw up and you look stupid, but then you start to kind of connect the dots and you're like, ooh, this is kind of fun. And then you level up and you're better and you're like, whoa, this is really cool. That's why I think it's really important for people to have something that they can measure their progress with that's outside of their realm of expertise. Like for me, when I was 15, I started playing guitar. And guitar and I think any musical instrument, is even your voice, is a great way to measure growth at something, because when you first pick up a guitar, you can't play chords. Like you can barely even differentiate the 6 strings. You don't know their names. You don't know how they complement each other, but you slowly learn and get better. Even if you just noodle around, like there's professional musicians who've never read a lick of sheet music, but because they just tried something new over and over and over again, you just get better. And that was the stage that I discovered the importance of actually working on yourself, because that was alien to me.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, from a music perspective, my brother is extremely talented in that regard. So I let him roll with that. That's all him.
What's he play?
He's a musician, professional musician as well, guitar.
Okay.
He's one of those freaks that can pick up any instrument.
Yeah, those people, man.
So,
I don't understand them. I'm so
I always
jealous of
joke
those people.
he's tall, dark, handsome, and a rock star. So I'm like, okay, cool.
Do you play anything? Are you a musician?
No, I'm the sporty guy. So
Okay, cool.
I can't complain.
Yeah, that same thing though. It's the same thing.
Super interesting you mentioned about these books, because when I then again reflect on my journey and some of those books, I went very technical, same thing. A lot of those books that you mentioned about, but actually one of the books that really impacted me was The Richest Man in Babylon, which now, if I look back at it again, almost a more spiritual book than anything else. So I'm like, oh, maybe I got to challenge some of my own beliefs here on that. So that was super, super interesting. So I'd love to delve a little bit more into your fitness journey, just because a lot of my audience is from a fitness background. But then also after that, I'd love to delve into your Be Better Industries, because I know it's a big part of what you do now.
Yeah.
So that fitness journey, obviously you've then had the trigger, you've had that conversation and you've gone, holy, I need to change.
Yeah.
What steps did you then take with your health and fitness and be able to actually change your life around ultimately?
Yeah. The first thing that we did was, my mentor looked at me and he's like, we need to work on your physical body, because I can tell this is something you're not happy about. I wore baggy clothes. I remember a coworker, actually, because coworkers are best friends, right? My coworker took a picture of me, and he was like the coworker, we didn't get along. And he posted a picture of me from the side slightly to the back. It was like a picture of the side of me, which love handles, giant butt, everything, dude. It was like, ugh. And he posted it to the work chat, and it wasn't to like point out like that I was a big guy. It was something to do with me helping a customer, but I kind of knew that he was just calling me out for being fat. And I was angry at him when I should have been like, maybe I should work on myself and do something here. And my boss pointed that out, and he's like, listen, if you're really serious about making these changes, I'll bring you to the gym with me 3 days a week. And I said, okay, cool. Where are we working out? And he's like, an hour from where you live. So I was like, okay, great. So here I am, I'm driving an hour to the gym with my mentor, and the gym was alien to me. I remember my mom got me a gym membership years ago, and I would stick to the treadmill and the elliptical, because that other 90% of gym that's there, it scared the shit out of me. I didn't know how to work out. I didn't know what different muscle groups to focus on. Like, should I do arms the same day as I do legs? Like, I had no idea. Again, something that we weren't taught in school. I know some schools teach it now, but yeah, exactly. Yeah, literally. And I went with him, and he started teaching me how to actually work out your body. And I remember it took 6 months for me to go from 260 pounds to actually 190 pounds I went to. So I lost like 70 pounds working out with him. And I remember, though, it didn't take that long for me to feel better about myself. Practically immediately after I started going, I realized that I was making progress, because other people started pointing out that I looked different. People started pointing out that I had more energy. People started pointing out that I was happier. And I was like, wow, very interesting. And then finally I start seeing differences. I feel that other people see it before we do. And before you know it, I'm 190 pounds. I have new tailored suits. I'm feeling really good about myself. And he just changed my life, dude, when it comes to fitness, because after I focused on my fitness and focused on my body, that's when everything else opened up for me. And that's when I started to dive into my finances. Okay, now I got my fitness under control. What is the next area of life that's holding down the rest? That was finances. And then I worked on my relationships with the people that I worked with and the relationships in my life. When you focus on your fitness, it's very rare that you don't become more enjoyable to be around for everyone else. I mean, the mind-body connection is so powerful, where when you work on your body, you are, in a sense, working on your mind. You're feeding it with different chemicals, different impulses, different experiences. So working on my body, and I know it's different for everyone. Some people out there, maybe I wouldn't recommend working on your body first, but for most people, generally, if they're feeling down, if they're feeling sad about where they're at, it's like, well, when's the last time you worked out? Yeah. When's the last time you moved? You know this better than anyone else, right?
It's so, so important. I think that your biology is just so important. I think even more so if you're a solopreneur, if you're the only person in your business is dependent on your health and your energy. And that's where, yes, there's times when you've got to go and hustle and grind and put in the hours, but you can only sustain that for so long before your energy completely drops, your biology goes terrible, your health is just in the gutter. But what also starts to happen is you become less disciplined and you start making less and less progress in both your business and your personal life. So it's why it's like you have to put yourself, your biology first as the trigger to then become more disciplined and be able to make more progress in your business. It's just so incredibly, important. And unfortunately, a lot of people do go the opposite way around, is where it takes their health to get to a bad place before they realize that, hey, I need to make a change.
Yes.
And they wait for almost something traumatic or one of those, challenging conversations, and don't need to. You can start right now. You got to make that decision. And what I think you mentioned was that part about ownership, which is just so important. That ownership of your situation is everything at that stage.
I think the energy was the biggest point. I think what you said was really good when you said that they let their health slide and then every other part of their business begins to slide. And for me, the biggest thing that I noticed was I now had more energy to actually spend with my loved ones after I got home from work. Yeah. I had more energy when I was with customers. I was making different food decisions because I was taking care of my body much better. At least I still eat like crap sometimes. I think we all do, right? But I was making different decisions because I was putting more intention into my body. And when you start focusing on improving in a certain area, the decisions that you make are very different, because you look at the mall Chinese food that you might want to buy. Because I worked in the mall for many years. I don't know if you have malls over in England. I'm sure you have something similar, right?
Nowhere near the size as what the US has.
Okay, which doesn't surprise me. But I would look at my coworkers eating mall Chinese and I'd be like, well, I just worked out today. I don't know if I want to get that. And I'd go get Subway instead, or I'd bring something with me that's better for you. So it's just astounding, the fact that you can focus on one area, and as a result, it changes practically every other part of your life.
Compound interest in a positive way, isn't it?
Yeah.
It just builds and builds, and snowballs, as Dave Ramsey would say. Love it. So you've obviously gone through this health and fitness journey. You've been in sales for this long time. But then I also know that you started your own company in 2019, Be Better Industries. So what was the thought process behind starting this business? Why?
It's a long story that I'll compress, but once I'm now 190 pounds, right? At this point in the story, I start moving up into leadership. I finally start becoming a trainer, and then I start giving team presentations. And I have a process that I call the 5 Ps of self-mastery. And we've talked about the first 2. The first one is create a plan. Like, what do you want to change in your life? What do you want your life to look like? The second P is you got to have the power so that you can fuel the plan, right? The power physically, but also the power emotionally. And the third P is what we're on now, and that's purpose. And once I started moving into leadership, I realized, wow, the raise is cool, the bonus is cool, but I really loved helping people to acclimate to the sales world, because people are afraid of sales, man. Even people who are in sales, they're like, oh, I don't like sales. I'm not a salesperson. It doesn't come naturally. And it's like, it doesn't come naturally to anybody. Like, it's a skill that you have to learn. So I loved helping new salespeople learn these things, and it got noticed that I loved helping people do this. So I became the head trainer for all of upstate New York, which is 44 retail locations. And for 2.5 years, I'm the head trainer, but I realized there's really no other place for me to go in this company. And I realized that I'm at the ceiling. And technically the next level would be to be an owner of my own set of stores in a different state. But number one, I didn't want to move. Number two, I have uncertainty with where cell phones are going. And I don't know if I wanted to be in the cell phone world forever, So I said to myself, I'm going to do this. I'm going to continue working my full-time job. And at the same time, I'm going to start building up my personal brand.
Love that.
At the same time, I was listening to people like Gary Vee Gary Vaynerchuk, for those who don't know him. And I didn't like him at first, but he grew on me.
Character.
And he just kept talking about create content, build your personal brand. And I loved what Tony Robbins was doing. He was such a main influence to me along this journey. I didn't talk about him much, but I watched every video you can find on him. I watched how he spoke. I looked at the old tapes of him when he was like my age giving presentations. And I was like, I want to do that same thing. So I started a speaking company, and it's now transformed into Be Better Industries. But I started this business in late 2019, 2020 hits, and then boom, pandemic. And it's like, okay, this is fine. I still have a full-time job. Obviously, I'm not going to be doing many of the in-person speaking gigs that I was hoping to do. So I focused on coaching. And that's when I started taking on my first coaching clients. And I helped people for free for a long time. But it got to the point where I didn't have much time to help people for free. So I had to start charging for what I was doing. And in time, I started my show, the Be Better broadcast. I wrote my book, which was actually one of the first things I did was write my book. And looking back on it, I'm like, oh man, I should write another one because I've learned so much since then. And it was a thin book. It's like 100 pages, but I did it purposely because people don't read. So I wanted to make it easy for them. But like we talked about, you start something and you don't know where it's going to lead you, but you just start and you just kind of go and you just do what you enjoy doing. Like with the podcast, you don't know where this is going to lead you. You enjoy it. You told me before we started, I'm doing this because I have fun doing it. I have passion doing this. And let me tell you, because you're doing it for that reason, you will take this to places that you can't even conceive of right now, even if it's not a podcast, but it's called something else. Like you start something and it leads you down the road. And this has led me down this road where now I've got different programs and I work with corporate America with another business. And it's very exciting times. But again, I don't feel that we ever really fully know what we're doing. Mm-hmm. And you're just kind of always taking advantage of the next opportunity that comes along for you,
So many out there. Many out there. There's a few things I've got here. So you mentioned the 5 P's of self-mastery, but I didn't actually catch them all. You've got plan, power, purpose.
Yep.
We're missing 2.
Yeah, I know. So the 4th one is Jim Rohn. Are you familiar with Jim Rohn?
Yeah, I've listened to his The Ultimate Library on repeat on an audio book for just nonstop.
He's incredible. For everyone else, he's Tony Robbins' mentor.
Yeah.
So he's the real deal. He was like the late 70s, early 80s when he was really in his peak in his prime. Yeah. And he had a quote that says, "You are the average of the 3 people that you spend the most time around."
Yep.
And I heard that, and I had to make some hard decisions during that journey of going from 260 pounds to 190 pounds because I was around a lot of unhealthy people. I was around a lot of people who didn't really want more from their life. And the 4th P is you got to get around the right people, because the people that you surround yourself with, you are the average of them in terms of their income, in terms of their mindset, in terms of their attitude. So my question for those listening is, who are you spending your time around? Do like a people audit. Yeah. Right now, if you will, think about the 3 people that you spend your most time with. And it might be a family member, but it also might be your friend. It might be your sibling. Like, who are you spending your time with? So that's the first part of it. The second part is the reason we met. I met Caleb Nelson through one of my business partners, Christine Smith. I met Christine Smith through another friend of mine, Brian Rollo, who is also a business partner. So the people you meet are instrumental to what your future and what your destiny becomes, because we wouldn't have met if I didn't meet Caleb. I wouldn't have met Caleb if I didn't meet Christine. So just the intentional meeting of other humans outside of your own industry, outside of your own circle, and inside of it, that is how you create opportunity. Because we don't know where our relationship's going to lead. But I just met Caleb and he's like, dude, we need to host a retreat somewhere beautiful. And we need to bring people to this retreat. And I'm like, dude, that sounds freaking awesome. Okay. And I had no idea that was ever in the scope of anything, even 4 months ago. It's like when I met him. So the 4th P is you got to get around the right people. And the 5th P is the simplest one, but it's practically the most important because it's the instrument that moves it all forward in the first place, which is progress. Nice. You've got to continue, even if you don't know what you're doing, you have to continue to make progress in a forward direction with what you're doing with your job or your relationship. it's not the end goal that's going to make you happy. I mean, you've heard this. This is probably from Tony Robbins. It's not the end goal that makes you happy. It's the journey along the way and the progress that you make. That's truly the part that makes you the most happy. Like what we're doing right now, this is the happiness. Like it's not when it posts and goes out there, but the doing of it is the happiness. And then the cool part is other people are going to listen and they're going to enjoy it too. And it might help one person make some big changes. Who knows what it could do, but we have to enjoy the process, because if you're not enjoying the process, then you got to pick something else that you will enjoy.
That's why the podcast is named exactly as it is, The Main Journey. And I think some people do think that that's because it's about me, but it's not. The actual wording is that everyone is on their own journey. So it's spot on, relates to that progress. You've got to enjoy that journey that you yourself are on. So there's 5 P's: plan, power, purpose, people, and progress. Love it. There was one with people where you mentioned Jim Rohn. I always thought it was the average of 5 people. So
it might be. I might have gotten it wrong.
Because I was like, oh man, oh, that's savage. That's even like, I think I like that even more because it makes you, cutthroat. But I was like, I like that. There was a couple of things you mentioned. One about creating content and the output of content. And I want to definitely touch upon that because you're prolific in your content output. So I want to delve into some tips on that. But before we delve into your content output, you mentioned that you had this full-time job and then you started this, the Be Better Industries. Ultimately, it was almost like a side hustle, it was a part-time job, which is really interesting to me because I was kind of assuming that, okay, financially, you're probably in a better place by this point. Like, why would you not just stop the full-time job completely and lean into
takes time
industries? Because there's a lot of people have different approaches. Some take this almost slower approach. I always link it to a plaster. And some people just rip it off. They quit the job and they take the leap, and some just slowly peel away.
I'm not that person.
Yeah.
I take risks, but I'm not the kind of person who will quit my job only because my expenses were still high. Right. So I was making 6 figures still. Yeah, I like to live a nice lifestyle. And, could I sell my car right now? Could I sell my home, move into a smaller place, move back with my parents, figure it out? Like you hear stories of people who quit their job and then they go live back at home or they figure something out. And I don't want to do that, especially because I enjoyed my full-time job very much. And I still do work with that company often. And it pays very well and I'm very comfortable with it and I'm very used to it and it helps people. So the reason why I enjoyed it so is because I was doing the same thing with that company that I was doing on my own. I was training salespeople. Like even now with Be Better Industries, I work with sales professionals to help them support themselves so that they can better support others. Yep. And I was doing that same thing with that company. Now, if I was selling cars, then maybe it would have been a different experience. Maybe I'd be like, I really hate working on my exciting business and then going to do something that I hate doing. Right. But I didn't dislike it. And I think that's the main reason why I took the slower roll approach. But I heard a quote recently somewhere that says, you're never going to look back and wish that it happened faster. Right. You're going to look back and you're going to realize everything happened the way that it was meant to happen.
Yeah. Powerful.
So if you think that leaving your job is the best thing for you to do right now, and you just know it in your gut and you know it to be true and you truly feel that, then by all means, like do that. But that definitely wasn't my route. And I took the slower approach.
Yeah. Super interesting. Again, like my approach for some of my journey was almost the complete opposite again. So it's so interesting.
What did yours look like?
So you essentially didn't change any of your lifestyle and you maintained that lifestyle whilst you went through this progress.
Yeah.
Whereas I quit very high paying job in Dubai when I was coaching up there to go work alongside a startup company where I practically moved into a backpack and was almost living in a deserted hotel because I couldn't afford to go anywhere else. So I went the opposite approach of like, I completely cut all of my, my expenses. I was, pretty much living on noodles and basically relying on friends and family to get by. So it's like my approach was so different. But yeah, super
very interesting.
So different. I love it.
I can't wait to dive more into your story on the broadcast.
Oh, it's been an interesting one, that's for sure. There's a fair few stories. That's brilliant. Brandon, I wanted to delve into content output because I've learned into this a little bit. And like I said, I always stalk my guests before they come on profile. And I was like, wow, this guy is consistent. You are putting out a lot of high quality content on YouTube, LinkedIn, on your Spotify for the podcasts. And I was like, man, when does this guy sleep? Like, how's he getting all this time? So I'd love to know the processes and some of the systems and things that you have to be able to output the amount of content that you do at the high quality level that you do as well.
2 words: video content. Video content is king. And I stumbled on it unintentionally, but I remember back in the day when I was going through my journey of transformation, and I'm still on that journey, the main journey, right? Yeah. Or the Eastman journey is what I'd call mine.
That's it. I like it.
I remember Tony Robbins, again, was a huge influence for me, but what I really enjoyed most was actually watching him on video deliver his presentations, and almost the way that he was literally speaking to you through the camera, and he'd make his giant body movements. And I felt inspired. I felt moved, and the man didn't know me, but it felt like he did. And I knew at that point, I want to be on video helping people. And I remember the first video I did was with that full-time job. The other reason I stayed with them too was because they paid for me to do a lot of things that benefited my business. Like they paid for me to go to expensive seminars, and they flew me to Florida, and they paid me to join the National Speakers Association. And they knew full well I'd be leaving them at some point, but they said, we want to help you on your journey. And I said, wow, that's a pretty interesting thing. And most companies wouldn't say that, but they helped me. And that's why I'm very loyal to them, even still to this day. Yep. But when it comes to video content, I was recorded. I finally had a professional video done of me presenting to a group of like 20 new salespeople. And my family loved it. My friends loved it. And it was like that hit of dopamine went off. And I was like, this is what I want to be doing. Amazing. And it took off. And the reason I say video content is king is because let's use this podcast as an example. Okay. And we'll kind of get granular here a bit. So I hope it's valuable to everyone listening. But okay, so now we have this conversation with us. You can now take this conversation with us. You're going to rip the audio off so it can be a podcast of its own. You're going to post this on YouTube. Then you can take the full video, which we're going to spend 45 minutes to an hour with each other, maybe 3 hours. Who knows? I don't know how long your podcasts are. I got time. And you can split that full podcast up and ask yourself, what were the highlights of the conversation? Okay. The 5 Ps. Cool. Okay. Him starting sales. Cool. We can use that. Okay. Him talking about content creation. That's a third one. So even 3 highlights. You can take those clips, and now you've got one video, but you've got 4 or 5 or even 6 pieces of content that you can then put on your LinkedIn. You can put it on your Instagram. I think the one place that where people go wrong is, and this is where I went wrong, and that's how I know, I focused on every single platform. At the beginning, I focused on Facebook and I grew that. I focused on Instagram and I started to grow that. I focused on nothing on LinkedIn, but I focused on YouTube, and I was dispersing all of my energy everywhere. And I had no time. I spent like 4 hours a day just posting content on top of my job. But once I started focusing on LinkedIn and YouTube mainly, that's like my biggest platform. I've got like 5,000 subscribers, which is a baby number to some people. But for me, like that's growth over a few years. And there's a group of people there who watch every video that comes out. So it's cool to see a community build, but video content is powerful, man, because you can get 6 posts out of one instance that you've invested your time into, where a lot of people are afraid to be on video, and a lot of people are even afraid to be on a microphone. And that's cool. Like if you're a writer, some people, I met a guy the other day and I said, what part of what you do you love the most? And he's like, I love to write. I wish I could write all day long. And I was like, that is certainly not me, but more power to you. And he can make content that way. But I hope I'm not talking too much, but there's one other thing that changed everything for me. It took me from 1 weekly upload to 5 to 7 weekly uploads. And everyone will get to this point at some point in their journey, but I brought someone onto the team. I actually brought on a Filipino video editor, and he lives in the Philippines. He's one of my best friends, his name is Errol, and I'm not going to tell people his last name because they'll go grab him and poach him. Hopefully he wouldn't leave. But I couldn't run my business without this man. Could I? Sure, I absolutely could. But because I have systems, right? We upload a video. He knows what to do when the video gets uploaded. We take all the clips and we post all the things. But Errol literally does all of the back end stuff that I don't like to do. Yeah. He does it for me. So I create the content. I create the podcast. I find the guest. I prepare for it. I've got systems for that too that make it easy that I'd be more than happy to riff back and forth with you about. But he then takes it and does all the magic in the back end. And he's allowed me to multiply my efforts because now, for the most part, I can focus on what my zone of genius is, which is actually having the conversations and creating the content itself, you know?
That's it's actually very comforting for me because for once I'm not the opposite of you here. I'm just a little bit behind in that journey in that I'm starting a little bit later. But I'm actually, myself made the same mistakes of focusing on way too many platforms and overcomplicating everything. So now what I'm doing is just simplifying everything. I'm focusing exactly the same, YouTube and LinkedIn, because I just truly love those platforms. And I am very fortunate. I have then a team that I work alongside, both of them from the Philippines, Alamar and Troy, two incredible people. That same thing. They just keep everything going for me. But it's very reassuring from my perspective to be like, okay, cool. I'm doing the right things. This is heading in the good direction. So I'm glad that you shared that. And there will be a lot of people that take a lot of value from that and get them to think bigger than what they already are, especially with their content, which is huge.
And I think there's another big point here too, is your content must lead people to something.
Yeah.
If you think about what your content really is, your efforts, it's not just you posting to post. At the very beginning, it might be just to build the muscle, but like where you and I are now, and a lot of people listening, okay, so now you've built the muscle of posting. Well, posting is the content itself is at the very, very bottom of your value ladder. Okay. And a lot of people don't have products, right? And we talked about your fulfillment and I'm more business, right? And there's faults on both sides. The faults on the business side is sometimes I can be so focused on just business and enrolling new clients that I might, it's not that I do, but I might look over some clients, right? Because I'm so focused on bringing in more. But from your end, it's like, okay, I want to help my clients, but you got to pay the bills and you got to bring more money in so you can continue to serve those clients. Because if you're in the backpack again in that rundown hotel, it's like you're not going to have much enthusiasm to help your people. So there's a balance of, okay, I need to serve my people at the highest level. And I also need to focus on bringing more people in so I can serve them at the highest level. So what is your content leading people to? And for me, the first thing was I led them to my free ebook. That was the very first thing that I did. And that's how I started to build my email list. And then now I really niche down and I love working with new coaches who were where I was 2 years ago when I started my business, because I had to learn about sales funnels. I had to learn about when is a website when's the right time? I had to learn about how to create the product, how to do the content. Like I had to learn all these individual things. And it's like, well, what if I could create something that made it easy for new coaches to just know these things out of the gate and have someone to guide them by the hand? So I created a 5-day challenge. And this I created literally a month ago. This is brand new. And all of my content, if you look at it, it's always the same. Hook to hook them in. Story, tell some kind of story with the content itself, and then call to action. What do I want them to do? Sometimes the call to action is, what are your thoughts on this? Or when has this happened for you in your life? But most of the time, my content is, if you want to go deeper into this, go to my featured section, click the link, and join my 5-day challenge. Yeah. Because again, this is the hang up that a lot of people get themselves in. People don't want to sell. Selling is service. Selling is a good thing. If you're not selling, you're not going to be helping people at the deepest level. I've never deeply impacted, I don't want to say never because I'm sure I have, but I said it again, damn it. I most likely usually aren't impacting people on a deep level for free. Yeah. Very rarely will your content hit home and resonate at a deep level for free. But when someone pays $1,000 to work with you, it's like, all right, I've got some skin in the game with Samuel. I've got to perform. I got to get my body into shape, right? It's like when you pay for personal training, you show up to the damn gym session most of the time. right? You show up for things when you pay for them. You pay attention to what you pay for. So having some sort of product that you can offer people who are begging to work with you, but they just don't know how, is so important when it comes to where's your content leading to.
Love that. And it's such a big world when you get into the funnels and the heavy marketing. And it's super interesting. You mentioned about, from your perspective, the sales and then, fulfillment not necessarily being your area of strength. It's the opposite for me. Fulfillment, my clients, I'm on them all the time with those results, but I rarely push marketing and sales. I'm at that point where people are like asking me multiple times to work with me because I'm just so relaxed.
Yeah.
So it's like that's my downside, is I'm far too like that area. So it's like polar opposites, which is super interesting. I've got a couple more questions I want to delve into. You mentioned about what you do now. I'd love to know about the best story of a client or best result that you've had with a client that's come through working with you, over the years.
Oh, wow. Okay. There's several that come to mind. I think one of the most impactful is one that hits close to home because she lives right near me. Her name is Jennifer Fogg, and she has her foundation called the Logan Strong Foundation. She is a cancer mom. So her son, Logan, he was less than a year old, he developed cancer, and she had to navigate through that entire journey. And he lived, and I'm not sure of the word, but he no longer has that cancer. And now she's navigating the journey of working with a special needs son with her husband and all the people around her. And she is a top performer at the company that she works with as well. But she wanted to share her experiences with the world of what she experienced when her son was going through this, when she was going through that, when her family and everyone close to her was going through it. So she actually she's in the Be Better Academy, by the way, which is my academy. She created a book called Tiny Miracles that shares her story. And her book has sold more copies than my book, to give you an idea. Like, she is an absolute phenom. Like, dude, she's out of this world, amazing at what she does. And she's so passionate and powerful, and she inspires me. But I bring her up because she released her book, but now she's saying, I want to become a coach and help other moms who are special needs moms or cancer moms. And I want to help them navigate the same journey that I went through. And I think one of the most fulfilling things that you find is we all want to help people. One, and two, we want to help people who are in the same place that we were just a few short years ago, right? Like, you can now show people how to start a podcast.
Yeah.
You could, if you wanted to, you could, because you've done it and you're living it right now. But we all have something that we do that we do a really good job with, that just comes naturally to us, or we've done it for years and years and years. Yeah. Like, I would never consider myself a guitar aficionado, but I'm pretty good enough to entertain people at a campfire, enough to get people to say, wow, you're pretty good. So I could teach beginners.
I remember,
right? I wouldn't, right? I wouldn't coin myself as a guitar teacher, but I could help people who were a couple steps behind me to learn something. And now she's in that same place where she went from just working full-time at this company, and now she's exercising the third P, purpose. She released her book. She's absolutely crushing it. We worked to get her on a ton of different podcasts that she's already been on. And now she wants to take it even further and help other people who are where they were. And dude, I don't care who you're helping, but helping people who are navigating the trawls of cancer has to be one of the most difficult and most empowering things that you could possibly do for another human being. It's one of the most primal things that you could do. So she, I feel like, coaches me, even though technically I'm her coach. But it's just that you get into that relationship with a lot of people where you find that, oh, it's kind of weird that I'm charging them, because I'm actually learning practically as much from them as they are from me. But we help each other on this journey through life. But that's just connection. One story.
Yeah, that's true connection. It's so powerful, isn't it? It's so powerful. And that's, for me, it's just why I love coaching, and just being able to connect people on that deeper level and just have that level of impact, and then see, what they can then go and do. It's so important. That's why
I think one of the biggest things you see, though, too, is, and you see this every day, I'm sure, that even if you don't see like the most giant breakthroughs for people, while you do have them, Coaching generally always does one thing for most people, which is the confidence that they get. Like working with another gentleman, Peter's incredible. He works with the same company as Jennifer, actually. And he was much newer. She worked for them for 10 years. He was with them for a year, but he was just not confident in his pitch. He was not confident in himself, even though he's this tall dude. He's built, he's a good looking guy. It's like, dude, why aren't you confident? And he's like, I just don't know. It's the product or whatever. Now he walks into sales presentations, knocks it out of the park. He's like one of the top on his team right now. He gets award after award after award. And he simply just had to tap into the confidence and the power that was already there. He just had to learn how to awaken that. So again, many stories, but I think one commonality amongst them all is just the amount of confidence that you get when you have somebody who's helping you to be the best version of yourself.
Yeah. Everyone has that confidence, but you gotta have the courage to pursue it in a way. Love it. Love it. So you've obviously been incredibly successful to even get to where you are right now, and that journey that you've been on. What's next? What are you working on at the moment?
I think one of the very next things is I want to do that tropical resort with Caleb Nelson. I think that's one of the biggest things. One of the projects that I just started working on with Christine Smith. And if, by the way, do you know Christine Smith? Have you ever met her?
No, I do not.
Oh, we got to change that. Okay. So I'm going to introduce you to Christine. She's absolutely incredible. Her, myself, and another friend of mine, Brian Rollo, who is a master at leadership. He was a leader for like 30 years at a very well-known bank in the area, just a class act guy. We're all getting dinner tonight, but we just started a business called Team Elevate, where now we take what we do and we bring it to the corporate world. So we work with sales teams and we work with other teams of people to help bring them to the next level. And really, one of the main goals is to level up that business and work with even more teams. We only work with 3 teams each year so that we can go deep with them. And I want to work to level that up while also focusing on these fun things. Like Zoom is cool, but there's something about getting together with people who have a common vision, who have a personal mission, and helping them to see that mission through, even if it was for a week at some resort where we could bring them in, they're here. And then when they leave, they're here with a bunch of different ideas and implementation strategies and all these different things. So retreats, one, and working with more corporate clients is the main goal right now, because everything else is kind of systematized at this point. That's
awesome. So cool. It's really interesting you mentioned about like meeting people in person, essentially, because that's an idea that I have, and something that I'm working towards is actually taking the podcast almost on the road with a camper van and go meet people in person as part of the travel and adventure aspect of what I do. So yeah, I love that. I've got a couple more questions. One, this is a question I ask everyone who comes on the show. It's a little bit of a challenging question, but what advice would your future self give you in this current moment?
Oh, what would my future self tell me? Wow. It makes me look back and wonder, like, what would I tell myself 2 years ago? And I think it would be the same. I think that I say we, but I'm really talking me, but I think it's everybody. I think that we get caught up in the question of, are we moving quick enough? And you ask yourself, am I doing my best? Am I moving fast enough? And even now I'm constantly asking myself, things just aren't moving as fast as I want them to. Am I doing things right? What more do I need to be doing? But then we look back several years in the future and we're like, dude, look at what I've created based on those efforts. And I think that my future self, and thank you, by the way, because I'm comforted by that question.
It's challenging.
Yeah. My future self would tell me to keep going, keep moving forward, keep doing what you're doing because you like what you're doing. And you have fun doing what you're doing. So keep doing that because it's going to lead you somewhere.
That's cool.
What are some other answers you get from people?
Oh, it's very diverse. It's very diverse. A lot of times it does make people pause and take a second because it's kind of speaking out the internal voice that they've been talking to themselves in for a little while, but haven't made public. So yeah, it's very, very challenging. But majority of the time it is, for most people I speak to, it is to slow down. It's
Slow down. Interesting.
Slow down and enjoy the process, and to take that stress off, because a lot of the guys we speak to are kind of high performers. So obviously for you, it's keep going, but you're in a healthy place. Whereas a lot of high performers obviously go all the time.
Yeah.
So actually for them, it's like, actually slow down, look after your health, enjoy the process, prioritize those relationships. But yeah, it's a very confronting question as well. I love it so much.
Yeah, their answers were a lot cooler than mine. That's for sure.
That means you're on the right path. That really does.
Well, thank you for that question, because that's a very powerful coaching question.
Yeah, I use it all the time.
I'm stealing it, dude.
Take it. Absolutely. I keep saying I got 2 questions, but this one, you've mentioned before that your mission is to positively impact over 1 billion people, and that you can't do it alone. So why is this important to you?
This is important to me because I believe that we can all make even just a 1% difference in the world from our actions. And I think that you and I were gifted to have, and I don't know your story fully, but just from what you're doing right now, it tells me that we're both in a place economically and in terms of what we're physically able to do to help people.
Yeah.
And I believe that if we don't take advantage of that, then it's almost like a shame to the people out there who aren't able to do what we're doing, whether it's because of a disability or a mental illness or where they were born. And I don't believe that everyone has the same opportunity. And I think that and some people will say, of course they do. They could do this and that. I don't. Like, I wasn't born in, Zambia or another third world country where I don't have the same opportunities as other people. And I think I found this mainly when I started to run advertisements on Facebook worldwide. I created a goal setting course, and it was $47 when it came out, and it still is. And I marketed it globally on Facebook, which served it to all of those underserved countries. And I had a lot of people engaging with it and messaging me. And those people were so appreciative for personal development, because their news and their media, they block messages like this. It's actually, I talked to one of them, and many of them, but one person specifically said, this stuff is blocked where we live. The only reason I even saw this was because I was on Facebook and it was an ad. He said it was the most helpful ad I've ever seen, because I put a video in the advertisement. It was like a 5-minute video, a sales video. And even that sales video was more personal development than this guy got. And I gave him the course for free, and he went through it and he's like, I've never heard of anything like this. And I realized there's so many human beings out there who don't have the opportunity like I did to have been given that harsh advice that my mentor gave me. And he wants to improve his life just as much as I wanted to, but they just don't have the resources. So I believe that I have no choice, but I must. In my mind, like, it's not a choice that I have. If I don't, then I'm not living up to my potential as a human being. And it's a very primal reason. But I believe that everyone listening to this is in the same boat. Like, you have it better than 99.9999999% of the freaking population. And it's like, stop making excuses. I'm sorry if this is tough love, but stop making excuses. Stop finding reasons why you can't do what you want to do, and start asking yourself instead, how can I do what I want to do? Because there is a way, because I have headphones in my ears right now and I'm listening to a podcast that's floating through the air and being delivered. So it's my duty to do what I'm doing. And I truly believe that.
Love that. So powerful. So powerful. And such a good way to, start to wrap this podcast up. But I look at that as like an obligation to serve. And that's so powerful.
Yeah.
Love it. Brandon, this has been so much fun. I've really, truly enjoyed this. So thank you so much for taking the time to join me, taking that leap, and joining me for this show. I'm going to have all your links, everything down below for the guys to check you out. But where is the best place for them, to go? I know you've got the 5-day challenge. I know you've got your book. What's the preference?
I think the best place for people to go would be, because everyone's going to be in a different place. Some people would be better for them to start with the book. Some people, the challenge. Yep. I'd say go to my YouTube channel if you want to dive in and see what I'm all about with Be Better Industries. It's not just me, like 90% of it's the guests that I have on my show on the channel. And if you want to start a conversation with me, which I would love you to, I'd love for you to even reach out and just let me know what you liked about this conversation so we can riff back and forth on it. Then go to LinkedIn. LinkedIn's great because you can actually have conversations with people. YouTube, there's a comment section. Like back in the day, you probably remember there was a messaging option back in the RuneScape days. but now LinkedIn is
Through
that
OG
place.
days.
Yeah.
I think it was 11 years ago when I posted my first YouTube video. I didn't tell anyone about it. Didn't tell anyone. And it got to like 100K plus views or something.
Wow.
Yeah, like 500-600 subscribers. But those were the days.
Good for you.
That was, yeah. It is funny to think back. But Brandon, thank you so much. Genuinely, this has been such a good time. I'm very grateful for you being on the show, and I look forward to what's to come.
Same here, brother. Thank you for the opportunity.